Good afternoon and welcome to our virtual service department here at Lichtsinn Motors, where we're just 1 mile down the road from the Winnebago and Itasca factory here in Forest City, Iowa. Today it's about that time of year to start thinking about potentially storing your motorhome for our cold winter months ahead. So we're actually going to dive into instruction for how to winterize your motorhome. Today, some of the unique items about the coach that we're doing is that we'll also be covering, beyond your standard winterization process, we'll also be covering how to winterize your ice maker, washer dryer, and this coach actually has a residential refrigerator on it as well, which is becoming more and more common in our Winnebago and Itasca motorhomes. A couple special guests that we have with us today. As always, we have Josh Dam, our marketing director, that likes to stay behind the camera. And then we also have Brad Buffington from our service department. He's one of our certified technicians that's going to teach us how to do everything. So a couple just maintenance or housekeeping items. As you watch the webcast, the best thing for you to do is to keep this interactive and to ask questions as we go. So as anything comes up for you, just be sure that you type in any questions. We'll answer those live as we are webcasting live here from Forest City in our marketing bay. So Brad, we're just going to get started, and again, kind of starting just from point A and walking all the way around in terms of the best process for winterizing, and again, just be sure to ask questions as we go. So what do we first do?
Okay, well, I like to think of it as we need to get rid of all the water that we've intentionally stored on board. So we need to drain our fresh water, drain our water heater, and drain our waste tanks. So we're going to start out by going and draining our fresh water, and on this unit, it's right over here.
And I should mention, today the coach that we're using as an example is a 2015 Winnebago Adventure 38Q model, which would be the same as the Itasca Sun Cruiser.
So this model has its freshwater tank drain located in this compartment here. And I have that valve pointed downward, so usually when the valve handle is in line with the plumbing, why then we're allowing water to flow that direction. And typically when we were done, when the valve is perpendicular to the line, then that is closed. So right now we have that valve open, and we've drained our freshwater tank so that is ready to go for the winter. And
so Brad, everybody's coach will have a drain that looks just like this or similar to this?
It will look several different configurations. In this model, Winnebago has that brass valve with the plastic handle, and then sometimes we have a yellow, quite a bit larger handle and a larger line. But in both instances, when the handle is in line with the piping, then it is allowed to go out, and when it is perpendicular to the line, then it is closed or retained. So when the freshwater tank is all done draining, you can go ahead and close that valve again and have it closed for the winter. That way bugs and that kind of thing don't get up into your freshwater tank. But once it's all drained, then you can go ahead and close it.
So Brad, since everybody's coach is a little bit different, and so all the holding tanks are in different places, that also means that this low point drain will be in a different location as well. Is there kind of a good way to know how to find that or where to find it?
Well, if you don't already know where it's at, typically you can look close to where the freshwater tank is. Sometimes they're buried and we can't get to those or see them readily. Otherwise, Winnebago has an amazing resource on their website for their plumbing diagrams, and you can always pull those up too. But typically they're in a very accessible location that is easy to get to and well labeled.
Okay, great.
So we've drained our freshwater tank. Then on the other side here, while we're just walking past, obviously you would have drained both your gray and your black tanks, so that we don't have those sitting with liquid in them. So that water is then gone. And then on the other side on this unit, we have the water heater and two of our winterization valves.
Now Brad, I know we walked past the port for the residential refrigerator. Is that something at all that we need to touch on now, or should we do that later?
We can come back to that in a second. So then we need to drain the water heater. Now some units, Winnebago has this cover over, and I've taken a few steps ahead and remove the screws. So if your water heater looks like this, it has a cover over it. There are several screws up underneath here that hold this panel in place. So I've removed those, and then I can just lift that up. And now all water heaters are going to look very similar to this. So I have my exterior cover that we can lower down, and then we need to remove our drain plug. Before I remove my drain plug, it's always a good practice. A, make sure your water pumps off so that we can run under pressure. B, I can relieve the pressure in the water tank by opening the pop-off valve or the pressure valve. So I could open this up a little bit. That's going to relieve some of that pressure so that when I take the drain plug out, it won't be under pressure and spray you and scare you or whatever. But then I would then remove the drain plug. So some water heaters, this is a little more difficult to get to. It may be tucked up underneath here. This one, it's a straight shot in. But either way, and then maybe we'll just back up a second. Either way, if you have an extension on your ratchet, then you can quite easily get to your drain plug and back it out. Our parts department, which maybe I should have brought one of those in here, but our parts department also carries a wrench that has the right angle built into it, so that a lot of times we can get around the gas valve and get onto it, and it makes it quite easy to get that out too. So our parts department does have that wrench.
So there's tricks to get to it if it's hidden.
Yeah, if it's behind the gas valve there, some of them are a little trickier, but a short extension on your ratchet will do that quite easily. So then we're just going to let that water drain out of the water heater, and for now, when that's happening, because it's kind of a slower process, you can just leave the drain plug out and it will just gurgle out on the ground. Then when we're all done, we just want to make sure to put our drain plug back in, so the same thing, dust and bugs don't find their way into our water supply by getting into the water heater. So we would just now let that finish, and I'm going to close this up because of this compartment right here. So that would be draining. Then we've gotten rid of, to this point, we've gotten rid of most of the water that's being stored on board but then we have several other things that we can do. For instance, excuse me, on this side, down here in the low part of the compartment, I do have two low point drains, and that's just kind of a drain that is at the very bottom of this freshwater system on each side of the water pump. I can open those up, and that will allow gravity to just let some of that water in the water lines flow out.
So now, does everybody's coach have two drains like that in addition to the one that we already did on the other side of the coach?
A lot of Winnebagos have low point drains, usually associated near or around the water pump. But by opening those up, they are by no means winterizing the lines, but we're just allowing some of that water to go out, so that we're not having to flush it all out completely with the RV antifreeze. So I'm just letting some of the water out. Okay. So these two are presented very neatly here and labeled. So like we talked about before, when the valve handle is perpendicular to the line, I have it closed or retained, and then I would just rotate this valve. Ooh. I would just rotate that valve over in line and allow that water to flow out. So I could do both of those. Another low point drain that we have would be for the residential refrigerator, and we can go peek at that really quick. The residential refrigerator has a low point drain outside, and we'll go take a look at it.
So now the low point drain for the residential refrigerator is essentially draining what?
We would be draining water out of the small line going up to the water supply in the door, or the ice maker located in the freezer. So if you have a residential refrigerator, you're going to have a small little door like this at the back. You've probably not been in there before because there's no real jobs in here other than where the refrigerator is plugged in and this drain. So you could open up that compartment door. I can take this short piece of tubing out, and then I have this brass valve here that when I would open this, that's going to allow some of that water to flow out of the refrigerator, as well as relieve some of the pressure from the supply line. So I could do that and get some of the water out. Then when we go inside and talk about the refrigerator, we're going to do that under pressure with our RV antifreeze, but we've gotten some of the water out, and then we're just going to make sure that that RV antifreeze goes through to all the way through to the refrigerator and ice maker.
So now if somebody does not have a residential refrigerator and doesn't have an ice maker, is there anything in particular that they would have to do with that?
Right. If you have like the narcoleptic with the water, they would have a water valve out here. So there are two lines like we have here. We have our supply line and then our line going up to. Those refrigerators would have a water valve located here in the back. Manufacturer of the refrigerator is going to say, and there'll be a red tag hanging in here as well, that we can simply remove those two lines, allow that water to drain out and winterize through, and the refrigerator would be fine. So you could either winterize through that valve, or following the manufacturer's instructions, remove those two lines from the water valve and allow that water to flow out. So there's a couple different ways to do that on those. So just wanted to make sure that you guys saw, if you have this style of refrigerator, that there is this valve out here. And of course, when we're all done, it's important to make sure that that valve is closed, and then we get this tucked back inside. All right, so now we've done most of our drainage. We got a lot of our water out, definitely all the water that we're holding. Then we're going to have two different valves for winterization associated and pre-plumbed in on your Winnebagos, and we can go over to that compartment again and take a peek at those.
Okay, Brad, we're just going to, as we do that, we're just going to cover a couple questions that we've had. One asking, has the winterizing equipment changed a lot over the years? They have an older coach. Does all of this information still apply to them?
I'm actually prepared to demonstrate that at this next compartment.
Okay, great. Then one more. Do I have the same draining for a tankless water heater, like on the Girard tankless water heater? And then they list the specific model.
Yep.
But in other words, the tankless, is that operated the same?
Yep. The tankless water heaters don't have a drain. They don't have a tank for us to drain. But what they do have is a coil that we need to winterize through. So when we're pressurized with our air or our RV antifreeze, in the case of an Aqua-Hot or the Girard On Demand, we need to use the RV antifreeze to go through those two systems, because we can't really do those efficiently with air.
Okay.
So
in which everyone as well, is there a place to reference in individual owners' manuals? Is it for individual components, or how do they reference for their specific coach? Yeah,
and like how we're going to talk about when we go inside, when we look at the washing machine and then all these individual components. Of course, the manufacturer's manual is going to have specific instructions or requirements for winterizing, as well as your Winnebago owner's manual is also going to have some good instructions on doing that winterization process. So really you have several resources, including what we're providing here today, and several of our other videos on our website.
Okay, and then the last one is in reference to the water pump, which I'm guessing we're going to go cover on the other side as well, but just wondering if that's something that you have to drain and empty.
Yeah, when we do our winterizing with RV antifreeze, we'll be winterizing the water pump, because we are using the water pump to draw the RV antifreeze through the unit. So then that in turn would be already winterized.
Okay, well let's head back over to the other side.
Okay.
As we walk over, I will cover the last question, which one of our viewers had asked whether or not this video will be able to be viewed again later. And we do have on our website, we have a tab that's up at the top that's called RV Lifestyle. And one of the drop-down menu options from that is our video library. And in our video library, you can find the list of basically any instructional video we've ever done, past webcasts, how-to videos as well. So it will be archived there on that page, where you can see all of our past, even past winterizing videos that we've done, as well as the one that we do today. And so that'll be up within the next couple days.
Okay, so our next step in this process would be to get prepared for using the RV antifreeze. And Winnebago typically has installed, especially with this type of a water heater, we have a bypass valve for the water heater and then a winterization valve for the RV antifreeze. So on this unit, they are very conveniently placed here, and they're labeled winterization valve 1 and winterization valve 2. So that first valve, that's the water heater bypass, and I have rotated that down to the bypass position. So now we would not be putting RV antifreeze into your water heater, so it won't take the 6 or the 10 gallons of RV antifreeze just to fill the water heater up. So the water heater is in bypass, and then I would turn the other valve up to winterize, and when that's up to winterize, then that makes this tube the source of your water pump, and then that will draw the RV antifreeze through your unit. So instead of taking water from your freshwater tank, we're drawing it out of that tube. So I have a gallon of RV antifreeze here, and I would remove the protective cap on the end of that clear tube, and I'll simply place that in my gallon of RV antifreeze, and we would be ready to go inside and use the water pump to draw that RV antifreeze through. Now, in reference to an earlier question, have things changed if you have an older motorhome or a non-Winnebago, and these types of things aren't provided to you? What I have brought out here is, and we will just assume that you've gotten to your water pump, and if you don't have this clear tube, well, then you could simply make up a tube like I have here, remove the inlet side of the water pump, and then attach this onto the water pump, and then you could then winterize just like we're doing here, and pressurize the unit with the RV antifreeze.
And so that would be for anybody who doesn't have a siphon tube.
Right.
Pretty much all motorhomes would have a drain somewhere, though, correct?
Yep.
Just potentially not a siphon tube and winterization valves.
Right. Some older units didn't have this, and then some non-Winnebagos typically don't have this provided already.
Yeah. Winnebago does a really nice job essentially trying to make the winterization process as easy as possible in terms of getting everything labeled and in a nice, accessible area. In addition to, of course, the instruction that you can find in your owner's manual, but essentially just making that process a little bit easier for you. And just like with all the drains, siphon tubes can also be located in a lot of different locations. Some inside the coach as well as some being accessible from the exterior, correct?
Right, yeah, some units, especially a unit with the water tank, the freshwater tank underneath the bed, a lot of times the water pump is located right there, as well as this valve.
So like the siphon tube, like we talked about for the drain a lot of times, like finding where your freshwater tank is. With the siphon tube, is that kind of like finding where your water pump is, and that's generally when you find the siphon tube? Yeah,
sometimes. Like newer Views, Navions, they have those provided out in your water compartment, so a lot of times those are there. Other units, maybe a Sightseer or something with the water pump under a water tank under the bed, then that is also both the drain and the siphon tube are right there. But if you don't know where it is, those plumbing diagrams on the website or in your owner's manual
that's the best go-to.
Are pretty helpful.
Yeah, Winnebago has a really great website that's very easy to navigate. If you ever have trouble with that, don't hesitate to call our service department. We can help walk you through that. But they have a great reference area for all of your plumbing diagrams, electrical diagrams. You can find all of that on Winnebago's website for pretty much any motorhome they've ever made, right?
Yeah, it's very well organized and very helpful.
Great.
We use it daily.
That's good. So what do we do? What do we do next?
All right. So in this demonstration, we're going to be using RV antifreeze to winterize the unit. Excuse me. Some customers use air, so you could use air pressure to pressurize the unit and blow it out, much like you would do a sprinkler system in your yard. So I have I know we're kind of jumping back and forth, but on the other side I have a device made up that we use here, and I can show that to you and how to do that as well. So maybe we can just jump over there before we go in.
One last trip around the back end, right?
Yeah.
So now is air, this is something that you could replace if you don't have the ability to essentially blow your lines out?
Yeah, if you don't like to use RV antifreeze, maybe you don't have any readily available, or you prefer this method, you can. And I have a device here that we've made up, and what I have here is a water pressure, or is a pressure regulator. So you probably already have one of those because you're used to using that when you go to campgrounds, and just to make sure that you have a regulated pressure. And then we've just made a trip to the hardware store and got a few plumbing connections, but then I have a valve here that I can regulate the provided pressure. Now a lot of times at your air compressor you can adjust your output so that you're at a safe level, and then just a connection for my airline. So if I wanted to use air to winterize my motorhome, I could have a device like this. There are some other ones that simply screw into your city fill, and they have a little valve on the back that you would connect like you were filling air in your tires. You could do those as well. This is pretty handy. You probably put it together for under $20. But I would then hook this to my city water connection, and we'd be ready to go. So if you pressurize with air, most of it's going to be identical to what we're going to talk about when you're winterizing with RV antifreeze. With the exception, we still need to run some RV antifreeze through the water pump, because we can't blow air through that water pump. So if you did pressurize your system and use air to winterize, then just draw enough RV antifreeze up that tube to get through the water pump, so that we know that the water pump is in turn then winterized.
So it's kind of like a combination of using both air as well as antifreeze.
Yeah, you would just use a little bit to get through the water pump, and then you'd be ready to go.
All right.
So that's using air. So now we're going to demonstrate using RV antifreeze, so we could go inside and get that ready to go.
All right, great. Give you a different view and walk around the front of the motorhome instead of the back.
You said last time.
I did.
So then we're hooked up now with our RV antifreeze outside. That winterization valve is on.
And actually, Brad, before you continue, I am going to interrupt you very rudely to ask one more question. One of our viewers asked, how much air pressure is safe?
Okay. Your water pressure regulator is all regulating you to that 40 psi range. Typically, city water pressure, is probably 30s to 40s. So that's your safe range. At home, we're never using our air compressors at that low of a level. You probably have it jacked up to 100 or 120 or whatever. So having that pressure regulator is going to protect you against that, or adjusting your pressure down. So if you want to put it at 40, that's going to be adequate to pressurize the lines and to blow them out.
Okay, great. And then one more question that's actually fairly specific to the 38Q. It sounds like they have a 2014 38Q and are wondering the two water valves above and inside the propane compartment, what those are.
Okay. So there, that compartment right above your propane tank is situated. You have your water pump there, and then you have two low point drains going through that and kind of on top of or in front of the propane tank. So just like we looked at here, those chrome valve handles that we looked at out here as low point drains, yours are just exactly right at your water pump. So they're right there. They're low point drains. We're going to allow pressure to escape out there, and we can drain some of that water out. And so in your unit, then your winterization valve and that clear siphon tube is just located forward and behind your water pump. So you have all of your things in that compartment right there above the LP tank.
Okay. So just a slight change from the 2014 to the 2015 in terms of specifically the 38Q
where it's at.
That we're using today in terms of the location of those valves.
Yep. And so all the different models, we're going to have very similar components to what we're looking at today. So, if this isn't obviously isn't going to be most people's motorhome. They're going to have all these different varieties, but these key components are going to be maybe in a little bit different locations, and presented a little differently, but they're all there.
Everything is still the same, just different spots.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So we're all hooked up with the RV antifreeze. I've prepared our sinks and everything so that when we turn them on, we're ready to go. And then I'm just going to turn the water pump on. And then we're going to go around to each of our faucets, the toilet, the shower, all these features. And I'm just going to open them up and let them run. They'll start running clear. And once they start running pink, then I know that they're done. Then I would go over to the cold side. We're going to get our clear water out, and then that's going to turn till pink, and then we know that this faucet is winterized both on hot and cold.
And so essentially right there what you're doing, as you're doing that siphon tube that we put into the gallon of antifreeze is drawing antifreeze out of that gallon.
Right.
And up through the coach.
Yep. So we know that by doing this, that all of our water features, both on the hot and the cold side, both of those lines are winterized. And we know we're good here. We could go into our bathroom and do our shower, as well as any of our other sinks, and going hot and cold in our toilet. You don't want to forget to do the toilet, as well as if you have a toilet sprayer, we need to open that up and get that flushed out and winterized as well.
So with the toilet, it's essentially depressing the flusher until you get pink?
Just push that pedal down. The toilet will start going pink. Once the toilet is running pink, then we can use the toilet. If you have a toilet sprayer, you can use the toilet sprayer and let that go until the RV antifreeze is through there too. And we should just probably take a quick second. I'm going to grab the bottle. I'll be right back. So that you want to make sure that you're using the right thing, right? We didn't go to the auto parts store and pick up antifreeze, and it's the green or yellow or pink kind. We want to make sure that we're using RV antifreeze, because RV antifreeze is non-toxic, and that when we're ready to go again in the spring, when we flush our lines out and purge our lines out, we're all good to go. We don't have the wrong kind of antifreeze lingering around to cause trouble. So when
that seems like a very important point to highlight.
Yeah. So you just want to make sure that you purchase the RV antifreeze. It seems like a no-brainer, but that's a question that we get all the time: is what do I need to use? You need to use RV antifreeze.
And so any brand, because I'm sure that there's multiple different manufacturers that make antifreeze,
yep.
It'll specifically say RV on the bottle. That's all you need to look for.
Yep, they'll say RV non-toxic. They'll tell you what they protect down to. Like for instance, the RV antifreeze that we have here is protecting us down to -50 degrees.
And hopefully nobody isn't that cold,
yep.
At least for an extended period of time.
Right. So, I think typically this stuff is all pre-mixed and ready to go, but that'd be another thing to make sure that you didn't buy a concentrate and that you needed to mix it yourself.
And it would say that on the bottle?
It would say that on the bottle, right. And the only way I've seen it is this pre-mixed stuff, ready to go, ready to use.
Okay. And is it typically always, is that generally the color that someone would be looking for?
The stuff that we've always had or seen has been always pink.
Okay.
There may be some other ones out there, but the biggest thing is you want to make sure that it's RV and non-toxic.
Okay.
And that it protects to the level that you anticipate seeing of cold.
Okay, I've got one more question here. Our viewer asks, I'm used to blowing out my sprinkler system. Hold on one moment. Let's see here. Using a pressure regulator. Is there any benefit of doing both?
If you wanted to winterize with RV antifreeze and then blow the lines out, that would be fine. Or if you really wanted to use air, blow all the water out, and then use the RV antifreeze, you could do that too. I mean, the stuff's, $3 a gallon. It's pretty cheap insurance. Typically, most motorhomes are going to use probably 2 or 3 gallons of RV antifreeze to accomplish that. If you have here, like we have, a washer and dryer or an aqua hot, or some added features, a dish drawer, those things, you're just going to take a little bit more RV antifreeze. So if you've made the trip to the store and you see it's on sale, pick up 4 or 5 gallons, and it doesn't go bad. You can use any leftover that you have next year. So there would be no problem with doing both air and RV antifreeze. If you wanted to go with the RV antifreeze first and then use air to blow it out, then your lines would mostly be purged and ready to go in the spring and wouldn't have as much sitting around to purge out.
So whichever form you choose to use in order to winterize, is one way or the other easier in terms of when you're de-winterizing in the spring?
Well, they're both fine. Both air and RV antifreeze are fine. If you want to do both, that's fine too. But they both singularly are fine. When you use RV antifreeze, when you get ready to de-winterize in the spring, we just need to make sure that all those lines are flushed out. And so you're going to hook up with water. You're going to just run everything until it doesn't run pink or foamy, and that'd be that process.
So there's maybe just a little bit more to it if you do winterize with antifreeze,
right,
versus blowing out the lines, but not a complicated process.
No. And I would say that probably most people winterize with RV antifreeze. So, but there's advantages to using just air as well. A little bit less to do in the spring. But it's pretty reassuring when you see that sink and faucet flowing nice and pink. You definitely know that
it's winterized.
That it's winterized too.
Okay. One more question before we continue. What temp rating of RV antifreeze should we use? I know we've kind of touched on this, but they're referencing like -50, -60, -100. Understand the temp rating doesn't mean the temp of water, but just in terms of the solid fluid.
Sure. Like here in northern Iowa, we typically have no problem seeing temps well below 0, wind chills well below that. So it really depends on your region. So if you are used to experiencing days and weeks of, 10 below, maybe 20 below, maybe you want to step up and go to that higher grade RV antifreeze. If you live in Kansas and it's cold to you is 20 above, maybe you don't need...
Still cold, just not quite as cold as some other area.
Just not as cold. I mean, we're not looking for bragging rights here, but...
Yeah.
So really it depends on where you're at.
So if you're in a colder region, maybe just for the peace of mind of knowing, it would be okay to go to a higher grade.
Yeah, and that's probably what they're selling you regionally as well.
Which maybe just, is it slightly more expensive, or what would be the
I don't
difference
know.
in the two?
I don't know.
Just the difference in temp rating.
Yeah, probably just...
If it's a question that you're asking, if it's a question that you have to ask yourself, it's maybe just one of those things that you should go with higher rating. And
RV antifreeze, you can put this jug outside in the winter and, it's, we're thinking, okay, it doesn't freeze. It gets pretty solid, but it doesn't freeze, and where the point of what causes our damage is expand, which that's what makes things happen. So RV antifreeze gets kind of thicker or solid in the very heart of winter, but it doesn't expand when it does that freezing part and burst our lines.
Okay. One more question here. Are there other things unrelated to water that should be done for winterizing the coach before putting it into storage?
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Here at the dealership, when we do a winterization and preparing either a guest's motorhome or we're preparing our own units here in the lot for winter, we have several different things that we do address during that winterization process. One of the things that I think is a good time to think about that is our rubber seals. So things that are outside our compartment seals, our slide-out seals, all those rubber seals around our windows, around our roof vents, we treat with a product that we get from Winnebago. It's called Aero 303. And so what it is, it's a UV protector, and it leaves a small film of silicone behind so that those rubber seals are protected and don't see degradation just sitting around in the winter. And so we like to do that a couple of times a year to our rubber seals. So you can do housekeeping items like that, treating and protecting our seals. Some customers that are going to put their unit away for the winter in storage will want to treat their fuel. So if you're treating your fuel tank for your chassis with a stabilizer or seafoam or something of that nature to keep the fuel from deteriorating over the winter storage, you can go ahead and do that. So treat your fuel tank when you do that, and then maybe you want to let your generator run for an hour or two so that we draw that treated fuel through your generator so it has treated fuel to protect it during the winter as well.
So kind of speaking on in terms of engine and generator items, is it a good idea now before you store the coach for the winter to do like your oil changes, your lube oil filter items, or is it better to do that in the spring when you bring it out of storage?
Well, whatever makes sense to the customer. I really think that, hey, let's put it away for the winter with our old fluids and our old oil in there. Let it see those temperature changes, moisture changes, and then when I get it out in the spring or we get ready to go south in January or whatever, I have that service done. That way for the season I start out with fresh filters and oil and fluids. So I think it's better to put it away abused and start out for the season new.
And now one of our viewers asked in terms of can we get that product from you? And I don't know in terms of if they're referencing the antifreeze or the product that you mentioned for the rubber seals.
Yeah, we sell both of those here at the dealership, as well as RV antifreeze, as well as the Aero 303. The Aero 303 is great. I think once you get it and experience it, you're going to love it because it really takes care of things well in your RV or around your home. It's just a really good product. So our parts department does stock that here. I'm sure that's something that they could send to you as well. We have a couple different sizes. We have a larger bottle and a small bottle, but it's really good stuff.
Sure. And so in terms of other items beyond just water systems, it's probably also important to think about your batteries before you put your coach away for the winter.
Yeah. We can check the water level in our batteries to make sure that they're topped up if we have a flooded type battery. It's always a good idea to check and clean those battery connections and the surface of your battery, so that if you have a clean surface of your battery, that when it's going to sit, it will keep and maintain its shelf life. A dirty surface on the top of your battery will allow some reaction across the top of the battery, and the battery will go dead just simply because of that dirty surface. So cleaning those, checking the water levels. If you remove those batteries for the winter and bringing them inside or set them in your garage so that they're protected, that's a good time to do that as well.
Okay. And another question here, wondering if there's anything special that needs to be done with the sink traps.
Right.
And should you put antifreeze into the traps?
Right. And that's our next step in the process here is we winterized all of our water lines. So we've gotten the water out. We've got the RV antifreeze through. Then at our showers and all of our sinks, we need to make sure that we dump a cup or so down the drain to replace the water that sits in our trap. So we want to go ahead and do that so that we know that water is not sitting in the drain line and going to burst that way too. So that's the very next step in our process. On our residential refrigerator, when we're pressurized with the RV antifreeze, then for instance on this one, I have the water inside the door here. I can push that, make sure I get that air only, or the RV antifreeze, whichever method we're using, all the way through. And this is another example here of something I failed to mention is our water filters that we would have in place. So some units in our refrigerators, we're going to have a water filter. So we would need our bypass plug.
Which the water filter in the refrigerator, is that in all refrigerators or just ones with water?
Right. A lot of most Winnebagos are going to have a water filter under the galley sink for the refrigerator. This one has one built into it. So I would need to remove this water filter and put in its bypass plug, as well as if we look under the galley sink here, this one will have a water filter location right here, and I've already got the bypass plug in its place. Okay, so the filter is out. Usually we just don't keep those around, use them seasonally, so take them, throw them away, order and get a new one ready to go in, put your bypass plug in, and then we're ready to go.
So now you always want, with any of the water filters that you're taking out and replacing with a plug, are any of those okay to put back in when you're ready to go in the spring, or should you always buy a new one?
I think it's safer just you've used it for the season, probably going to throw it away. That way bacteria and stuff doesn't build up in it, and then we're ready to go at the beginning of the season with the brand new filling. Now, another thing that we can look at as an example under this sink is I have a valve here, which in this floor plan, that valve is meant for water to the refrigerator. Now, under some different floor plans, if we have like a dish drawer, for example, we would have a valve for the dish drawer as well as for the water in the refrigerator. So here I have, this one is closed, so I would need to, when I'm winterizing, make sure that I have that valve open so that we're getting that RV antifreeze or the air through to each of those different items.
And so that's essentially in reference to like if somebody had a dishwasher or dish drawer.
The dish drawer, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So, because maybe you didn't use it this year and you had it turned off, but maybe it hadn't been winterized yet. So we would need to make sure that we get that RV antifreeze through. And
so then do you just have to run a cycle with your dishwasher, or?
Right, and like we're going to talk about here with the washing machine in this unit, as well as if you had a dish drawer. We're going to turn that on. You know, like on a dish drawer, you just put it to rinse. And let that draw the RV antifreeze through. Once we know that that's got the RV antifreeze through it, I tell it to drain. And now that first time we drain it, that's drained a weakened solution of RV antifreeze because it had some water first and then some RV antifreeze. So I tell that to drain and go away. And then take your gallon of RV antifreeze, and for the dish drawer and what we're going to talk about here at the back for the washing machine, just put about half a gallon of that RV antifreeze in there and then tell it to drain again or do a cycle so that we know that when we winterize that drainage line that we use pure RV antifreeze to go through that.
Alright.
Okay. So we can go back now and look at the washing machine. Before I forget, don't forget to do your outside shower. So we have that outside sprayer. Don't forget to do that. Sometimes they're in different models and floor plans. They're in different compartments. Some models we have the quick connect, like in our eras and those types of things. You would have, then you need to make sure to put your quick connect sprayer on and winterize through that too. So don't forget to do your outside shower.
Realistically, that's probably the first thing. In terms of the first thing that could potentially cause a problem in cold temperatures.
Yep, because it's outside.
Right.
So don't forget to do that. And if you have a unit with a black tank flush, so if you have the Santa flush or a black tank flush, then you can give that a shot of air as well, so that the water that could be sitting in from the port outside all the way across to the other side of the black tank, just give that a shot of air so that we've blown that line out as well, so that doesn't freeze up.
And so now, for any of our guests that are in like the Tours or Ellipse, for example, that have the AquaHot system, is there anything important to highlight with that that's different? Or
Yep, very important item with the AquaHot is you cannot winterize an AquaHot system with air. So the coil that goes through the AquaHot is a double coil, so it goes this way and it goes this way. And so, yep, you can hook up and blow through it and you won't get any water out. But what you did is, if we think of that tube, the air has blown enough water out so it can get through, but then when you relieve the water or the air pressure, the remaining water comes back down and fills up the pipe, and then it will damage it and it will burst. So, if you have an AquaHot system, you need to use RV antifreeze to go through the AquaHot to properly winterize it.
Okay. All right, well, let's hit on the washer.
All right, so on the washing machine, while we're pressurized with the RV antifreeze, I would just turn the unit on and I want to pick a setting that's going to allow me to adjust the water temperature to warm. And I'll explain that in a minute. So I typically just go to cotton regular, and then I want to set my water temperature to warm. That way I'm getting cold and hot when I run that, and so both the cold and the hot lines are being winterized. So once I have that selected, then I would just tell it to start. It's going to go, it's going to blow out the water, or it's going to run the water, and then we're going to get the air or the RV antifreeze through. Once I know that happens, I'm then going to stop the unit, and then I'm going to put it to drain. And on here it's C, so then I would put it to drain. And then I tell it to start, and it's going to drain whatever was in there. And then just like I was talking about with the dish drawer, then I'm going to open up the door. I'm going to put that extra, the rest of that half a gallon of RV antifreeze in the washer. Close it up. Tell it to do the drain cycle again, and then I'm going to take that pure RV antifreeze and drain that out.
So a couple questions that we've had here, Brad. Now, for all of our viewers who have the combo unit, where it's a washer and a dryer in one unit instead, is that the same process for them, or is there anything that's different?
Yep, that would be pretty much the exact same process.
Okay. And then another question that we had is someone wondering the attachment that you showed to hook up to the inlet of the water pump. Is that something that we sell here at the dealership, or something that they would need to create, or how would a person get an attachment like that?
We don't sell that exact same thing because we made it. But in our parts department, we have several different fittings that go on there, and you can hook your own air hose up to that. So that was what we showed in the service bay, right? For the water, for the pressure. Right.
I think what they're referring to is if they don't have a siphon tube.
Oh, then yeah, we can get you the fitting that goes onto your water pump, and then you can go to your hardware store and just pick up a piece of tubing and connect onto there, and then you'd be ready to go. So
we have the connection piece, and then they would just need to get the clear tube.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Totally lost my train of thought.
Washer?
Oh, if you don't, like maybe your unit just has a prep for the dryer, the washer, but you don't physically have one, you still need to do winterization through those valves. And so sometimes it might be in an access panel, like in this particular model. If you didn't have, we got stuff in here. So, in this particular model, if you didn't have the washing machine, then we have an access panel here as well as down below. And you can maybe see that. You will find those valves, just like you have at your home behind your washing machine. And we would just simply, you can either put a jug under them and then open them until you get the RV antifreeze, or if you're not comfortable doing that, you could connect your garden hose onto it and put it into your shower and let it go through that way. But you just don't want to forget. You don't have that item, but you have those faucets in an access panel that we need to winterize through just to be safe as well. Okay?
All right. What other items have we not covered yet? Or any other storage, winterization tips that we should be aware of?
The one thing that we need to remember is when we're done, when we get ready to go in the spring and we're flushing out our lines, if we have our water heater in bypass, when we're flushing those lines out, when we're done, then we need to remember to go back and put it to normal so that the next time we turn the electric element on, we know that the water heater has water in it and we don't burn up our electric element because we didn't have water in the water heater. So that's one tricky thing to try to remember. And if you did that when we were done today, you could certainly do that, or just when you're purging your lines out, make sure to turn that back to normal.
Okay. So otherwise, if there's any last things we need to wrap up outside, like getting the siphon tube or any of those items put back?
Yeah, we could turn those valves back into
Okay.
the proper position. Now we're getting done putting some of these things away. You just want to wipe out your sinks around your drains and stuff so that RV antifreeze doesn't sit there for the winter, and it could have a potential for making a stain, or it's just harder to clean up after it's sat there and dried for the year. So just wipe those out nicely so you're good to go. Make sure we have our drain plug back in our water heater, our freshwater tank valve closed so we don't get bugs and whatnot back up in there. We can come back and do our valves so that we're back to normal operation. Back to normal operation on both of those. We can be done with our RV antifreeze. Get our cap back on there.
And so as you're doing that, just one more question here we have. Should the black and gray tanks be drained after winterizing the lines?
Well, I'm going to say that you don't really probably have to. If you've emptied them before, the little that we've put back in there isn't going to really probably just barely cover the bottom of the tank. And some of what we put in there is RV antifreeze. So I'm going to say you wouldn't necessarily have to, because there's plenty of room in that tank for what little we put back down there to expand and not cause any trouble when it did freeze. So it would not be necessary.
All right. Well, Brad, do you have anything else for us?
No, I think that about does it.
All right. Well, I think we've covered all the questions up until this point. If you do have any additional questions on winterizing, don't hesitate to either contact us through our website or, of course, calling into our service department. Are happy to help you. Don't forget the reference that you have with the Winnebago website. If you have a Winnebago or Itasca product, you've got all the plumbing diagrams there for you, and then, of course, the instruction that's in your own owner's manuals as well can help you through this process. Otherwise, we do have now a few different winterizing reference videos that show a variety of different coaches for you for some different levels of instruction. As always, we can do these same type of presentations for you on whatever it is that you desire, whether it's a coach that we have here at the dealership or maybe a service item. We're always looking for suggestions in terms of our future webcasts. But thank you again for joining us. Thank you for Josh and Brad with all of your instruction, and we will see you again next month for our next webcast.